All right, so today we're going to be talking about the 2014 movie Wild, directed by Jean-Marc Vallée, in which Cheryl Strayed embarks on a journey through the Pacific Crescent Trail to find herself and heal from the many traumas in her life. In the film, we see many dark themes such as drug addiction, domestic abuse, grief, and rape, and many others. In her process of self discovery, we find many of the themes discussed in class to be to me, the most important too would be gender and authenticity. Wilde portrays Cheryl's hike as both a confrontation of the gendered expectations that have shaped her life and a search for a more fluid, lived sense of self. The film suggests that womanhood and authenticity are not fixed essences, but evolving processes that are shaped by experience, trauma, and choice. Firstly, going into the gendered reality Cheryl has faced and continued to face. Cheryl is a victim of the gender expectations that are set upon her whole life, and the movie illustrates that the trauma that has created for her through her memories, while showing how even in a remote setting like the PCT, these expectations and the reality is still unrelenting. Skews it all describe how gender essentialism leads people to see women's behavior as determined by biology, or also be used to justify men's violence as natural. And going back to her childhood, we can see that Cheryl has seen domestic abuse firsthand from a very young age through an abusive father, which hit the kids and scarred her mother. Um, and this was in line with the ideas that Skew et al. Is describing with gender essentialism through the male justification of violence. Later in her life, Cheryl finds herself in many vulnerable relationships, getting talked into doing heroin with one and sleeping with many random men. And we see how these traumas have conditioned her responses from very early in her journey on the PCT. When she wants to get help from the man who's driving the tractor, she sees a couple comments that he makes in his car as overtly sexual and coming on to her, when in fact he was just trying to help her out. But because of Cheryl's past traumas and maybe a little bit of ambiguous wording, she perceives a threat that is greater than what it actually is. And at this moment, she realizes she'll have to accept the trade off between wanting help and feeling safe almost any time she asks for help on the trail. Later on, the two hunters that she meets in the wood make her feel unsafe and embody what skews it all to identify as backlash, which is the negative response that women face when they're setting outside of their traditional gender roles. And Cheryl's independence and solitude violate the traditional expectations of femininity, so she becomes a target of that backlash for the hunters. Her most positive seeming interactions with the men with men on the trail, feel like the young boys who she meets when she's at the post office, as they take her out of a bad situation with another man and uplift her in a way that she hasn't really been thus far on the trail. Additionally, the sex scene in the small town, we see in other sex scenes Cheryl looks more wanting to be hurt or submissive or in some sort of power dynamic in the sexual context. But in this scene, she accepts pleasure and shows signs of a growing love for oneself. Cheryl's eventual ability to choose intimacy on her own terms resists gender essentialism. Instead of being defined by what men expect of her, she begins to reclaim control over her body and her pleasure. Moving on to authenticity, the purpose of hiking the PCT for Cheryl is to find herself. Cheryl is a serial self-deceiver and goes on this journey to realign with the person that she thought she once was, or the person that her mother raised, as is a motif through the film. As Stephen Mitchell argues, authenticity isn't really about uncovering a buried true self, but it's about becoming through time and experience. And Cheryl's hike is not a return to who she once was, it's a process of evolution and a creation of a new self. So Mitchell points out that even our false selves serve adaptive purposes, and Cheryl's denial during her drug addiction, or her more comedic denial of being a hobo when the Hobo Times interviewer comes to take a picture of her, can help to protect her psyche until she's ready to face the truth of what's going on. And this is a learned habit from her mom. We see a scene with Cheryl and her mom in which a young Cheryl confronts her mother for acting like everything's fine when their life is in reality pretty miserable. And here we see the trade-off between the desire for authenticity and also wanting to allow yourself the space to have a happy life. And a young Cheryl doesn't really understand this trade-off, but we certainly see her mother's self-deception tendencies playing out in Cheryl's later life. According to Mitchell, the authenticity unfolds in moments of alignment when one's inner and outer experiences match. And on the trail, these flashes of memory and confrontation for Cheryl, her dreams, are temporal moments of authenticity. They're brief, but they're real, and they're revealing of her inner traumas. By the end, Cheryl has clearly grown and is more happy with herself, more able to live with herself, and ready to pursue the life that she wants to live and the life that she describes living in the closing monologue. The film really illustrates the power of solitude and for understanding the self, and is a great reflection of many of the themes that we've discussed in class.